Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Behrakis, Chair of the National Hellenic Society. It's our pleasure to welcome you to another episode of NHSTalks Stories, where we learn about some interesting people and work that they're doing. And tonight I have fellow Bostonian with me, Dr. Alexandra Touroutoglou. She's the Assistant Professor of Neurology at Harvard Medical School, and she she's Director of Imaging Operations at Mass General Center of Translational Brain Mapping here in Boston. We're going to talk a little bit about her work around Alzheimer's disease and what she's famous for, the super agers. And we'll also learn about her relatively new position here in Boston at a national diaspora organization called the Hellenic Bioscientific Association of the United States. She's the new president, and so congratulations for that. I know it's been a few months, but congratulations as well. So we're going to jump right into it. Alexandra, welcome. Obviously, you're born and raised in Greece, so we'd love to start as we usually do with these stories. And this is, collaboration we have with the National Hellenic Museum in Chicago to record these webinars and, make them available for not only for yourself and for your work, but also for the community at large. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Alexandra, welcome. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background about where you're from in Greece and what got you into medicine, and then specifically into Alzheimer's and your journey that led you here to the United States.
Thank you, Drake, for inviting me. It is such a great pleasure to be here with you and an honor to be talking about and sharing with you about our work, our work on superagers and Alzheimer's disease. As you said, I came in the U.S. 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. I grew up in Ptolemaida, a city close to Thessaloniki in the north part of Greece. My parents were not scientists, but they really valued education. So I knew I wanted to be a scientist and I wanted to study medicine, but I didn't know back then that I was going to come in the US. That came after I realized that I wanted to study the brain. And in Greece, when I finished my PhD, at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, there was no neuroscience lab in the whole Greece. So if you wanted to study neuroscience, you had to leave Greece. And I was drawn in here by the labs that they were using this innovative technique of functional MRI, where they were looking inside someone's brain, and I was fascinated. And so when I got an offer from Harvard Medical School to come and do my postdoc, I accepted in a second. I did not think about it at all. And so I came here and I started my postdoc. It is not that it was easy. It's not that there were no challenges, but it is, I was very lucky to be in a great environment with people that supported me. I felt welcomed, and I had great collaborators. And so I was able to move the ladder, and from postdoc stayed at the same Department of Neurology at Mass General, and from postdoc I became a junior faculty in 4 years, and then assistant professor. But I've come where I am thanks to, I think, great Greek mentors and the education that I got from Greece and the amazing culture that we have. So, which is why I'm involved in the Greek Society, and I want to help other scientists as well, because I'm not just a scientist, I'm a Greek scientist.
And you know what, it's what's impressive. You said you've only been here for 10 years, and you mentioned the value of mentors, which of course is a very critical aspect. But your research, you've been awarded NIH grants, which obviously is very competitive and very challenging, which is tremendous. And you've had plenty of scientific interest and media attention based on the work that you've done. And you've won awards. I think one year you were the Woman of the Year in Greece in 2017. And as I said earlier, you've devoted a lot of your time here in the States in the scientific community and bridging the U.S. and Greek medical profession. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. So let's talk about your featured, your presentation, but your featured work. And we titled this presentation, Youthful Brains in Super Agers. What's their secret?
Let me just say up front that I don't know the secret,
yeah.
just to manage expectations, but I hope I will be able to give you some interesting ideas.
Sure,
today.
sure. So let us know. So, what, when did you start your discoveries in older adults, and what made their brains, I guess, or what was the I guess the research, was it stuff that already had been done before by other scientists, or was it just something that you brought together yourself? And tell us a little bit about that, how your research began, and what got you to that point.
Yeah, thanks for asking me that. It was a serendipitous discovery. So we were basically disconfirming all prior research. As we all know that as people age, there's memory decline, as we can see. As I will show you some data to show you this aging effect. It's pretty dramatic. And so, but in our study, we were over and over, we're not able to replicate this effect. And we were asking, what's going on? Why is it that in our sample, we cannot show this very common effect that memory declines as people age, that older adults should have less memory than young adults? And then we said, wait a minute, let's look at this average data. Let's look at these individuals. Who are those individuals? And then, as I'm going to show you later in the slides that I prepared for you, is if you look at the individual differences, you will be able to see that some older adults have really sharp memory that really it's useful. And so we then realized that it's not enough to look at simply at average data, but you have to look at individual data points as individual differences. And sure, that's how we discovered these super agers. So maybe I can share the data with you so that we can discuss together while reviewing those data.
Sure, and tell us. I mean, obviously, I'm sure the audience is not as technical as you are, of course.
So before I talk about them, let me just give you a very brief background on the changes that happen with that happen with typical aging on both the brain and memory. So we all know this. It is very common for memory to decline as people age. And you can see this in this graph that I have here, that over a decade, from young adults to older adults, there is a decline in memory performance. And you always see that in every study. So looking at this average data, as we said before, you might come to the conclusion that memory decline is an inevitable consequence of aging. But take a look at this individual data. The data points that I have listed here are representing individuals. So if you look at those individuals that I have circled, those older adults really seem to have memory that it is rivaling those of young adults. You can see that they have the same memory abilities as people, young adults, decades younger. So young adults are 25 years old and older adults are 70 years old. People that post-retirement or around the retirement age, mostly in the 70s and 80s. And so this is what really intrigued us and made us think, what is happening with these people as they continue to have sharp memory? What's their brain look like? These were 17 people. They all come from Boston, but we had 23 typical older adults, their peers, that had typical memory decline. And these 17 people, when we compare them to their peers, they were not different in neither age, in neither gender nor education. So they come from all walks of life. And so so it's not that their histories or their backgrounds that matter. So what makes these people unique and special, we asked. And the first thing we wanted to do is to put them in the scanner and look at their brains. Before I show you a superaging brain, let me show you how the brain looks like for an average older adult when you compare them to a young adult. It is a pretty depressing slide. It's all these hot red yellow spots that you see in the brains are areas where older adults atrophy compared to young adults. So these are the areas in the cortex, and it is a widespread effect, as you can see. It's not just one brain region. There are multiple brain regions that atrophy as we age. And now look at the brains of superagers. If you compare the brains of superagers to young adults, you don't see any difference. They are statistically indistinguishable from young adults. They are really youthful. As you can see, there are not yellow spots at all. Remarkably, the brains are truly youthful. And so this first study, our first study showed that the superagers have preserved neuroanatomy. They have been unaffected by the typical patterns of atrophy that you would see in normal aging. We further looked at that into more depth, and we were able to identify a brain signature for superagers, meaning that we now know what parts of the brain are important for someone to be considered as a superager. But, you know, the structure of the brain is not the whole story, because brain regions are not isolated islands. They are connected to each other. They form networks, and these brain networks include regions that are functionally connected, that they functionally communicate with each other. Regions talk to each other, and in order to perform a function. And so it's not enough to look at only anatomy. To understand the brain, you need to look at how it's wiring, how the regions are being connected. And so that's what we did. We wanted to see whether, we asked the question, if superagers avoid the typical atrophy that you would expect in normal aging, do they also avoid the typical loss of connectivity that you observed in typical aging? Because in older, as people age, and in people with cognitive problems or Alzheimer's disease, you do observe a disruption in this brain connectivity, in the communication between regions. So here on the slide on the left, I have shown you that this is the method that we used. We used a method that was able, using this MRI technique, we were able to quantify the strength of connections between different brain regions. And that's what we found. We found that brain connectivity of superagers, shown here in red, was stronger than typical older adults, shown here in green, and almost indistinguishable from young adults. So superagers did not only have youthful anatomy, they also had stronger, more connected youthful brains. And so,
can I ask you a quick question? Was the differential I mean, again, we're looking just at graphs. It seemed like on the anatomy and the atrophy, there really wasn't much of a difference, as you said. We're here, the wiring or the networking. There's obviously there's a little bit of a decline, but not, as you said, not as significant as typical older adults. So that's one area that kind of stands out a little bit.
Yeah, so it's not, so it was not, as you said, it's not quite that they were intermediate between the young and the typical older adults, their peers. The connectivity was reduced a little bit, but not significantly. And so if you could find, for example, these are average data. If you were looking at the individual data points, you could find a superager with an equally strong connectivity as a young adult. So statistically, there was no difference between young adults and superagers, but there was, of course, a significant difference between young adults and typical older adults. You can see the decline in the disruption of brain connectivity between the young adults and the typical older adults.
This might be premature, not only as a question, but maybe in terms of your research. But is there an estimate, maybe, that you've kind of a ballpark estimate of percent of people that are considered older or elderly that may be considered super agers? And I'm sure we'll get into a little more if any demographics or regions of the world, and I don't even know if there's been any genetic work on that as well, as you try to identify what's kind of the common link.
Yes, it's very early to say because work is in progress. There has been a study on genetics that has been identifying 56 superagers in Chicago. A group from Northwestern University has looked at the genetics, and they were able to identify that superagers compared to their peers, they have some differences in one gene, the mitogen activated protein kinase gene, which is a gene that is related to memory, but also to brain cell, the cell death due to beta amyloid protein. So there are differences. So this suggests that the difference between superagers and their peers might be genetic. But it's not, genetics is not the whole story, because it's probably a complex mix of factors, nature and nurture. The same group also found that that social factors are also important. Superagers, for example, reported more friends and more family connections than typical older adults. So it is a variety of environment, enrichment, enriched experiences, environment, and genetics, I would say, that could explain why the superagers retain such a youthful brain. To answer your question about the prevalence of superagers in the general population, we need really epidemiological studies. Here, the percentage was very high in Boston. It was high, but I think it had to do with the fact that here in Boston, many people are very, we had such a great participation in our study. We also had a little bit more women superagers than men, but way more women would like to participate in studies than men. So I wouldn't say more than that. It is a rare phenomenon. It is not something that common. It is a rare phenomenon. It's an elite group, definitely.
And we're again, I encourage our listeners and our audience, both on Facebook and Zoom, to please feel to submit questions. We actually do have a question already, so I think let's try to keep this interactive, which you have very well done. A question is it true that older people's brains simply clear the space to enable more room for new memories, rather than just having a perceived memory loss? And I know just from my own experiences that older people's brains, I guess, as the atrophy, they do shrink. So there's more room, physical room. But with regard to the question, what's your answer?
So the question is, if the shrinkage that we observed in the brain, the atrophy that we observed in the brain, leaves room for additional neural generation?
Yes.
Generation of the neurons. That's a great question. I have to say that plasticity happens in the brain, and the more we experience, the more we have experience with the task, the more, for example, the connectivity of brain regions becomes stronger. We have evidence for that. We have evidence that even cortical thickness, the gray matter, can increase after training. So plasticity happens, so I would say regardless of atrophy. When the cortex atrophies, then it's not only that there are less neurons, it's also the connections to other regions, which is really important, is being lost. So I wouldn't say that the shrinkage would leave more room for neurons to be taking over. The other thing I wanted to say is that it's not if you really want to, if you think that superagers are a distinct group from typical older adults, a qualitatively different group from older adults, you have to test how these two groups react to a memory challenge. And you have to look at their brain as they're doing it. So it's not only the anatomy or the connectivity. And so that's what we did in the third study. We used functional MRI, which is a wide available technique, fMRI technique that was actually discovered here at Mass General, in the same building where we are conducting our imaging studies. In the functional MRI technique, you put someone in the scanner, you give them a task. In this case, we gave them a memory task, and you are watching their brains to see what brain regions are activated during the task. So it is it's a way to get the best possible picture of what's going on in the superaging head. And so the way this works, the memory task will increase activity in the brain by increasing blood flow and oxygen to brain regions. The activity in the brain will light up in the images of the scanner, and this way you get a report of the activation of the brain. And basically it is it's almost like acquiring a little movie of brain thinking. So that's what we did with the superagers and the typical older adults when we gave them a memory task, and this is what we found. We found from fMRI images showed that superagers here on the left activated a brain region called anterior mid-cingulate cortex. If I can, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor now. An anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So the activation was in superagers, it was greater than in typical older adults. This is what is interesting about that is that this is a brain region which is not traditionally related to memory. It's the brain region that it is related to attention. It integrates information from different parts of the brain, and it is related, it predicts persistence, tenacity, grit, effort in the face of a challenge. So this suggests that superagers, when faced with a difficult memory task, like the one in the laboratory that we gave, they were activating a brain region that, they were more willing to exert more effort in this task. Just to make a note here, the memory task that we gave, there were 16 unrelated words, and after half an hour, they had to recall all of them. Typically, 50 years old will remember about 9, and 80 years old will remember about 5. Superagers remember them all.
I guess outside of, obviously, you're showing us the scientific proof and the research you've done, is it as simple as saying, or I guess if, we're so used to, in our life experiences, whether it's through family or friends, sometimes we're amazed at some people that their health declines physically, but mentally they're still sharp. We use terminology like sharp, like, they're sharp, or they still have their wits, and they still have their memory recall is at a later age. It's, they're still on top of things. Are those like obvious characteristics, or is it even more than that? Because there are a decent amount of people in the 70s, 80s, even 90s that still have a very sharp mind, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good point, and actually that distinguishes successful agers from superagers. That's a great point, Drake.
So what's a successful ager then? Why don't you tell us?
So successful ager would be someone that you just described with a sharp memory. Superager, someone with a youthful memory. It's sharp to a point that they have not seen any decline. We don't know whether, actually for superagers, we don't know whether they started with stronger, larger, thicker brains, or they started out life like that, or if they started at the same level as typical older adults, but somehow their brain changed as they age to compensate for any effects of aging. So we don't know that yet. It's theories. There are several theories that we are currently we and others are investigating. But that's the main difference between superager and successful ager. A superager has a youthful, sharp memory ability and a youthful brain. A successful ager have a sharp memory, might not be youthful, and we don't know, the brains will likely have some atrophy, but not to a point where it will affect their memory abilities.
Thank you. Thank you. So obviously the question everyone wants to ask is and you said it was, it's still very early, relatively early in this research. So it's not as if you're monitoring newborns from day 1 to 85, 90 years old. I mean, you've started this research in the last decade. So
in 2016, we identified them in 2016.
16, yeah. So, okay. So obviously there's no magic bullet or no magic switch that you turn on or something that you do, but how do you, at least from preliminary research, how do you become a superager? How do you think these people became superagers?
This work has attracted a lot of interest from the media, and our findings have been featured in BBC and New York Times. And so here I wanted to show you a video that superagers talk about how to stay young. It's a piece that was produced by BBC. Let's see what they have to say.
And they're all superagers.
They are all superagers. Let's see what they have to say. What advice and tips they are giving us.
Don't lose interest in life. Just keep busy and keep moving.
You need to find something that you love that makes you feel curious and alive.
It's a number to me. I feel much younger. I started exercising very young. And when I say young, in my 50s.
I just think I can accomplish wonders. I like to do things. I don't want to sit in the background. I'm an optimist first and foremost.
Have variety in your life. Enjoy what you're doing.
Enjoy being challenged.
Don't take anything for granted, including your own body. Make new friends, try new things, live the life you love, and live the life you lead. Just keep your mind open and be as argumentative as you want to be. Feel like I'm the last one standing.
These are a remarkable group of older adults, really. I have one more superager that comes. So, Sophocles, the Greek dramatist, noted the existence of successful agers, superagers, in his play. And he said, "Ke gari gero ego, to tis the heroes, ou gegire ket stenos." What if I have aged and my strength has not aged? And he himself wrote his strategy, Oedipus at Colomos, at age 92. So it's not about only memory. It's about its attitude, social factors, its genetics. It's a complex mix it's a mix of complex factors.
Sure.
We're trying to figure it out.
Is there any connection to superagers that they also are fortunate enough to have good health or non-life-threatening diseases or illnesses, or is that in your research it really doesn't? I mean, there's no correlation at all to being healthy and living longer physically.
That's a great question, Drake. Two things I'd like to say here. First, when a group of researchers looked at the Alzheimer's pathology at their brains, they found that superagers and their peers have the similar amounts of amyloid plaques, which is related to our Alzheimer's pathology. So this suggests that you can superage by not getting Alzheimer's pathology, or you can superage by getting the pathology, but somehow you manage not to get sick with it. So they become resilient to the pathology. And they have, from anecdotal notes, we know that because they come from all walks of life, and superagers seem to be, one common characteristic is that they seem to be resilient. So even if they had difficulties in their life, they are resilient. I would say that. And then the other thing that I would say is that superagers are not, when I think the main characteristic of superagers is that they are tenacious.
When do you, I guess, how early can you detect if someone is a superager? I know you track ages, but at what point do you begin to look at that data? At what age brackets?
Right, at 65 and older.
65 and older. Okay.
65 and older, yes. At 65 and older, someone is meets the criteria of age to start talking about superagers, and then we give them a memory task. We have norms. We know how a young adult, 25 years old, will do in that task, and we compare the performance of a superager to the young performance. And they also have to have a normal executive function and a normal attention, let's say, not superior like memory, but a normal attention.
I mean, when was the earliest you'd see atrophy?
30 years old.
30?
30 years old, yeah. It's normal, and it happens to everyone. It just doesn't happen for superagers. Everyone except for superagers. Yeah, so superagers is it's an interesting phenomenon by itself. It's interesting to study superagers, but by studying superagers, you can also learn things that are related to Alzheimer's disease. By studying superagers, someone can understand who can develop models to predict who is going to be vulnerable and who is going to be resilient to pathology. And this is where it really comes in. And actually, the national plan for Alzheimer's disease that was recently discussed this April and in the Alzheimer's Disease Summit, the goal is to study the healthy brain aging to prevent Alzheimer's disease by 2025. So studying superagers can inform strategies to prevent Alzheimer's disease. And just an example, we mentioned a gene that was identified in superagers. This gene can be a therapeutic target. For example, an inhibitor of that gene can be a therapeutic target for Alzheimer's disease, for resistance to Alzheimer's disease, and for enhancement of cognitive abilities or memory abilities. And then what we're also doing, and here I have a slide to show you, really to answer the question, can you reverse age-related memory problems? Now, from the superaging work, we have developed a model. We have a signature in the brain that includes all those brain regions that are important for a superior memory ability. One of them is the hippocampus, which is deep inside the brain. We cannot reach this region with electromagnetic stimulation, but we know that the hippocampus is being connected with other regions that are in the cortex, which is at the superficial level. So we can, using a technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation, we can send electrical current through the connection from the cortex to the hippocampus and improve memory. And we have some preliminary data that show that at least temporarily, we can reverse memory problems. We can improve memory symptoms using this technique. So this is this is a clinical trial we're currently doing at Mass General. And we hope we can, when we will have more data, we hope we can share that with the community.
Wonderful. And then what do you get excited about? What would you like to see, in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years in terms of your work and research?
People ask, can I be a superager? So it would be great if with this technique we can improve memory to a point where a typical adult becomes a superager. That would be very exciting. But then when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, I think it's really important to identify strategies to prevent the disease, even to slow it down.
Because your research is so innovative, have there been other, I guess, scientists or researchers outside of this area, or even within the greater Boston area, that have also started different studies and trials and research as well, or is it just your lab so far?
So other studies are, other groups are using transcranial magnetic stimulation, the call that I'm showing here, the technique to improve symptoms, to improve memory, not in Alzheimer's disease. Super-8s, we are the only ones in Boston who are studying Super-8s, but I hope there will be more in the future so that we can collaborate, pull data together, and really, when scientists collaborate together, we will know that we can have results pretty fast, like faster, and we all benefit from that. So I hope there will be more that will be working on Super-8s. One of the priorities of NIH is to study the healthy brain aging and Alzheimer's disease. So I would say that any researcher in this area maybe has less of a competition than others.
Do you have any collaborations with any pharma companies?
It is a bit premature yet, but we hope we will be able to collaborate in the future, definitely.
And we have a question, can anti-inflammatories slow the progress of Alzheimer's?
I think it's, I wouldn't say yes or no, because it's a complex relationship between inflammation and Alzheimer's disease. There are data that show that indeed inflammation leads to, is related to dementia, neuroinflammation, I mean, but I would say that it is a complex relationship that, because we're not studying it, I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Why don't you fill us in first briefly about the organization and the work it's doing, the history, and then we can talk about your role and your goals and expectations.
Well, that's, yeah, thank you for asking me that question. HBA, Hellenic Bioscientific Association of the USA, was founded in Boston 15 years ago, and was founded by distinguished academics and scientists. The mission of HBA is to enable and facilitate interactions among Greek biomedical scientists between the US and Greece. And we had, as you mentioned, relatively recently elections, so we have a new board of directors now. We are 9 scientists. We just want to help other scientists. So we have the goals of our objectives is to really enhance networking among scientists, to facilitate the dissemination of information and ideas on professional and scientific topics, to distribute information about grants that might be interested to everyone, and to promote collaboration among HBA USA and other associations and or universities to really to advance the careers of bioscientists, of Greek bioscientists in the US. And we have a variety of programs that are aligned with these key objectives that I just mentioned. One program that we have is the Science Teaching and Exchange Program. This is a program where we believe that the first step towards strengthening the connections and collaboration within the HBA USA community is through connecting US based Greek professors with universities in Greece. And Dr. Konstantinos Linos, which is who serves as a counselor at HBA, is really spearheading this initiative. So we have been collaborating with Aristotle University, the University of Crete, and other universities in Greece, where we send Greek biomedical scientists in the US to give a lecture and also discuss about possible collaborations with the hosts in Greece. Another program that we're doing is the Travel Scholarship. You know, the ultimate recipient of HBA USA are the young students that are interested in getting into this field. So we want to help young bioscientists to come to the US and get exposed to how research is being done in the US and present their findings in a conference. It's not easy, it's very expensive, travel is expensive, conference registration fees are expensive. So we try to facilitate the whole the whole initiative for them to come and present their work. We recently, now that we're talking about travel scholarships and awards, we recently partnered with Greek women in STEM, and we plan to also give an award in a Greek bioscientist that is based in Greece, a Greek woman. We're very proud of that. But when people come here and for exchange reasons and they come here and they attend clinical labs and research, we don't leave them by themselves. We have a mentoring program where we match the student that comes here or the student that is interested in coming here or interested in bioscientific field in general. We match them with an accomplished professor here in our community, where the professors will give advice and tips on, to guide them for the next steps. Another way for someone to advance their career is to hear about to hear an accomplished professor giving a talk and talking about their own experiences. And so that's the program Meet the Professional, which is being led by Dr. Yannikou, where she's organizing seminars with accomplished professors talking about the difficulties, the challenges, but also the beauty that comes with doing research and having a career here in the US. So these are the main progress we're doing, and I just want to say that I have been very, very lucky to have a great board of directors. The vice president, Christos Lisgaras, is doing amazing work in coordinating different types of programs. Another event that we actually have this Saturday that's being organized by one member of our board, Maria Stamu. So she's organizing an event where we are going to invite MDs that did their medical school education in Greece, but they came here and they did residency. And so they're going to talk to us, to Greek students, medical students in Greece. They're going to talk to them about how to come in the US to do residency and giving very specific advice. So these are all these different programs are under this umbrella that we want to facilitate interactions among Greek bioscientists in the US and in Greece.
A follow-up question. As we know, one of the major areas or focus of the I shouldn't say new government, because they've been in new democracy, has been now for almost 2 years, is doing a more outreach and collaborations with the diaspora, but also not only just on the on the educational front, because the Minister of Education came here and she was in contact with a number of universities. I know a number of people here in Boston, researchers, scientists, physicians have been involved in discussions and collaborations. At your level, do you see that? I mean, obviously it's encouraging. Do you see that, or is it still kind of in the early stages, I guess, compared to where it may have been, several years ago?
I think I think there are significant steps that have been made towards this extroversion of universities and collaboration, and there have been some steps that have started, initiatives that have started in the past. So like in 2016, for example, I went to Greece for as part of the Niarchos program, where scientists from Greece would go to from US would go to Greece, give a lecture, and start a research collaboration, all funded by the Nyarchos Foundation. And so they started slowly to have these initiatives, but now I can see a difference. I can understand. I can see that these initiatives are now priority for the new government, and along this line, we have started a collaboration with Γενική Γραμματεία Πόντιμου Ελληνισμού and Δημόσιας Διπλωματίας, which is the General Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the General Secretary of Diplomacy, and we're going to organize some common activities along these lines. So I think I can see these little steps that are happening towards the same. So definitely, I can see a difference.
And your membership is obviously is not just Boston. Even though the organization is based here, it's nationwide.
Yes.
Are you also in other countries as well? Or is it's just U.S. focused, correct?
U.S. and Greece. U.S.
Greece, right. U.S. Greece connection. And how many members or how many active or participants do you have that are involved?
So more than 600. More than 600 academics in the U.S. and Greece. That's
wonderful, and I think that's one thing that I think all of us, and I don't think you need to be in the medical field, the medical community, to know that. Certainly, those of us that are here based in Boston, between the universities and the medical facilities and the research, we see that. But just the number of Greeks that have come here to not only to study but also to do fellowships and research. These are high caliber, and so it speaks volumes to the educational system that they receive or their educational training that they receive to get, at least to learn the sciences and the math and to pursue a career in health or in the medical field. And so it's great to see so many of them that are very well accomplished. And have done some remarkable things across the world, not only just this country but beyond. And so what's the next steps, and how can for the association, what are kind of your next steps, a little more longer term goals? What would you like to see? Is it more expansion of the existing programs, building, I guess, build bigger bridges in that connection, having more fellows come over here, or more scientists and students come here for more training? Obviously fundraising sounds like an important part of that. What types of collaborations do you want to see beyond the ones that are currently in place?
I think I would agree with everything you just said. In addition, I would say one of our goals is to collaborate with other national Greek American associations in the US, because I really believe in collaboration. It is part of the American culture here, and I really think that it's worthwhile looking at different activities options where associations can meet and organize together towards achieving the same mission, because I think that looking at different associations in the US, there are common goals and under the same mission, and so I really believe in that. So I would like to start talking with other presidents of associations to collaborate more closely.
Well, we're winding up.
National Hellenic Society is my number one priority, obviously.
Well, that's why it's a pleasure to have you on, and not only to discuss the great work you're doing, but also to highlight the organization and what it's all about, especially to those communities outside of the greater Boston area that may not be familiar with it. But and it's true. It's all about it at this generation. Going forward, it's all about collaborations. The margin of error is just too thin. Not only just from and you can look at it across the spectrum. It's not just the cultural. It's not just our religion. It's really across sectors and different areas. And so the more we can collaborate, the more we can come together for organizations to kind of work together with organizations that have common goals and common visions is something that I think we all strive to. And we look forward to collaborating and working with you and your organization, not only here in Boston, but beyond here in the country. So I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank you, Dr. Touroutoglou. It was a very interesting presentation on the super agers and touching upon Alzheimer's and the great research you're doing, and as well as on the organization, the association as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be talking with you.